Hello, everybody. I'm Richard Brent. I'm the Editor-in-Chief of Briefing magazine, which stands for All Things Smarter Legal Business Management. That's our strapline. And thank you very much for joining us for this launch event of our Knowledge Leaders Conference, virtual event, of course, for 2021, which is an ideas exchanging forum. This session is focused on maximising an investment in Microsoft Teams, which I'm sure many of you, if not all of you, will have made at some point, particularly in terms of internal knowledge management, but potentially also, of course, for client content and collaboration purposes. It was excellent to see so many briefing people on the guest list, so thank you again for coming for this event for our knowledge community. I'm sure many of you might have also already joined a private guild group that we set up on this subject. If not, I'd encourage you to do so later, where the discussion today could continue and evolve. I'll remind you about that again later. A few really small points before we get stuck right into the main discussion around the opportunities and challenges of that topic. The session today is being recorded for distribution shortly afterwards. I'll be inviting people to offer up their perspectives and experiences on the topic. But please also do feel free to unmute yourself and to speak up and respond to something somebody has said at any point. We'll also be running a really quick poll just in the middle, just a couple of questions. So please do take part in that as well. That would be great. Thank you very much. And we've also designed today's session in partnership with Aderant, who are experts in knowledge management, of course, as well as other types of technology, other solutions. And I'm pleased to welcome Derek Schutz, who's joining me to host today. He's product manager for KM products at Aderant. Hi, Derek.
Hey, Richard, how are you?
Hello. I'm very well, thank you. Here's Derek. And he's gonna contribute, of course, as well. And we will also be joined, if we haven't been already, because there are a lot of us. I think we have been. Hello, by Joshua Fireman, who is the founder of Fireman and Company. Joshua's practiced law with two of North America's largest law firms. He was also in-house counsel at a multi-billion-dollar corporation, and he's since had a decade in consulting, in the consulting space, including around knowledge management, change, and client collaboration. Hi, Joshua.
Hi, Richard. Thanks for having me today.
That's my pleasure. Thank you. Okay, so we are going to get straight into the first subject. All of the subjects, of course, connected around deploying and maximizing the use of Microsoft Teams. But the first area I want to get into is how law firms can, if they wish to, surface their intranet securely, of course, within Microsoft Teams to drive greater efficiency. The extent to which I suppose that's desirable, what the considerations are around that, if it's something that you're specifically looking at, any of you who are here and have joined us. So I'm going to just start the ball rolling with somebody fairly randomly, maybe Richard at Addleshaw Goddard, Richard Gaston.
Thanks, Richard.
With a 1 in 7 chance.
Bad luck, Richard.
Well, that's my fault for appearing late or something and appearing at the top of the list, however Zoom allocates people. So I suspect that the contextual picture I'll paint is very similar for everybody in that we've been using Teams internally at a really low level pre-COVID. Really in my team and IT, because we were using that to host team meetings and do a bit of chatting collaboration, and then Teams accelerated because we had to as we shifted all 1,900, 2,000 odd people in our business to remote working last March. Mm-hmm. I think in terms of the model that we have, so there's some thinking, it's not mine, it comes from Ernst & Young, about the idea of the cathedral and the bazaar, the well curated set of knowledge resources, which is our intranet, and the know-how that sits also on the same SharePoint platform to be surfaced through search. And then there's the bazaar, which is the short-term spaces that people spin up for informal collaboration. And that language about short-term collaboration spaces is from quite an influential Gartner paper from about 2005. And that's always been the strategic model behind our intranet. In terms of bringing the two things together, unless people tell me possible, I'm not sure that that's actually technically possible yet. So we've seen concepts from Microsoft about pinning SharePoint-based intranets into Teams.
Yeah.
We just haven't managed to do that or make that work. And I'm not even sure that it's possible. I think it's still in the roadmap. It's a trailed development. But if somebody tells me they've done it, I'd love to hear about it. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Does anybody want to tell Richard that they have done that? Otherwise, I'll continue on that theme. But do speak up if you do have the answer to that particular challenge.
I think, Richard, one thing I'll just say is that we do have a couple of clients who have done it. The prerequisite is that the intranet has to have been built based on the current SharePoint standards without deviation. And I say that because we have a lot of firms that just want to tweak it, and that will break when you're trying to bring it into Teams. So it is absolutely possible, but the question is there's a difference between is it possible and is it valuable? And that's also the conversation that we have, that we try to have, which is just because we can do it doesn't mean anyone's going to find it useful unless we understand what the use cases are around driving it into that medium. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I should have mentioned at the start as well. Do feel free to use the chat, of course, if you want to put anything in there as well as speaking. How about Lynn? Because you also mentioned in some notes, sort of preliminary notes about this idea of the bazaar and the cathedral. What do you think in terms of whether you would actually want to use Teams for an intranet? For intranet purposes?
One of the things that we've got is that our intranet is now quite established, but over time it's been filled with all the bizarre stuff, both stuff that Richard's talking about, and so it's increasingly become a communication channel, and there's a lot more focus now on the comms piece around it, and it's that comms information doesn't have to stay on the intranet nearly as long as some of the other stuff does. So arguably the know-how database, the library links, finance with the VAT number and the bank account numbers, all of that stuff that we need to keep. And so it is the idea of how we split that out. And do we try and put the comms piece onto the intranet, or do we move the comms piece into Teams and keep the intranet as a separate entity? And just how you balance your needs, because I think if you've got an intranet and you're using it for comms and you're using it to store what Richard described as the short-term collaboration spaces, they just end up getting left there, and it increasingly means that the real content on your intranet gets devalued because people can't find it, and they think if they find something that is out of date, that everything's out of date.
Right.
So it's how you balance that, I think.
Does anybody share that view of that common challenge, or have a different view at all? Catherine, maybe. Sorry, maybe there are more than one Catherine. Maybe there's more. Catherine Cadman. Where do you stand on the using Teams to surface the intranet? Is it something that's on your roadmap? If you're trying to speak, I think you're on mute, Catherine. I might come back to Catherine.
Cheers.
Okay.
Someone had to go first with that, didn't they? Yeah, so we're actually at the start of our journey with this. We haven't progressed very much with our Microsoft Teams. We're starting to roll that out. We've done some pilots. So I'm very much at the start of this journey, and I'm really here to learn from others, to be honest.
Okay. Yeah, fair.
So from my perspective, I don't think we would necessarily want to integrate in the first instance. I think it's really about us getting up to speed with understanding and maximizing the value that we can get from Teams. We do have some thoughts and ideas about how we want to use it and integrate it, but I'd be interested to know whether or not that's actually possible, which is why the start of this conversation is already very, very helpful.
Oh, that's good to know. That's good to know. Okay, yes, Lynn. Lynn Beaumont from Shepherd and Weather.
Yeah, so we too are at the start of the journey. We weren't using Teams till about June last year, but there is one aspect that we're exploring now. So we're looking at giving people the opportunity to set up a client or matter team at the same time as matter opening and use that for collaboration related to a matter. And on our intranet, we do pull in from Aderant Interaction a variety of sources, information into pages that we call client matter pages. So we are looking at how we can put that into a Teams channel potentially, so you can get the collaboration, but also easy access to that information at the same time.
Okay, interesting. Thank you very much. How about Eleanor? Eleanor at Irwin Mitchell.
Yeah, so when we started with Teams, we'd already launched it pre-pandemic, but we had only kind of launched it as a small group, so probably quite similar to Richard really, and then rolled it out to everybody. There was a kind of initial period where it was very much more about just kind of calls, basically video calls and normal calls, and just a way of keeping in touch that way. But we have since then introduced all of the collaboration features as well, and we're kind of building on those, which is really good. And from a knowledge point of view, I think it's fantastic just to give people that kind of ability to collaborate without basically filling up their inbox with lots and lots and lots of reply all emails. So that's been really good. And things like working on documents together and that kind of thing, I think is really, really positive. What we have done though is kind of in terms of looking at the intranet, I think we've got similar issues to everyone else really, and what Lynn was talking about just now. You know, there is a load of quite frankly rubbish on the intranet, and I think when people do searches you get some good stuff, but you also get a lot of old stuff that people haven't removed. So we've kind of taken an approach where we're splitting off some of those things, and we're looking at knowledge kind of separately from the intranet as a sort of a comms tool for the business. And we're looking at, you know, is it even an intranet? Are we even going to call it an intranet? And these are some of the debates we're having at the minute. So exactly where that sits and how the knowledge content will be accessed, I think is an interesting one. You know, is the intranet your portal into all of this, or actually do you access some of this information in different ways? You know, when you're working, you might access it through Teams because that's where you're collaborating with your colleagues. You might even access it through, you know, other places as well. You know, you might access it through some of the, you know, normal sort of Microsoft tools like Word and stuff like that, where you want to go off and find different bits of information. So yeah, so we're having that sort of debate at the moment. There was another question that you asked as well, which I'm trying to think what that was now. So you were talking about the intranet and where you put that. Somebody said, so I'll come back to you on those.
That's fine. Thank you. We've got another hand up. I think so. I don't know if somebody's trying to speak, but we've got another hand up. Sarah Mitten at Wigan.
Hi there. We were using Teams pre-COVID, and during COVID we introduced an app within Teams which was predominantly for training. So you could ask it, it's a chat box, so you ask it any question you like about any of the Microsoft and some of our other applications, and it will give you an answer. And if it can't give you an answer, it will give you a trainer. But we are looking at running that into our SharePoint if we can, so that we can actually search our intranet by it. So you could ask it for, say, where's the firm handbook? And it would take you to the link to that instead of having to search the intranet. So we are looking at sort of using that app that we've introduced to bring in our intranet into Teams.
Okay, thank you very much. Susan at DAC Beechcroft, Susan Ford at DAC Beechcroft. Hi, Susan. We can't hear you just yet, so I don't think you're on mute. No. Never mind. Hopefully we'll come back to you a bit later, Susan, for that point, or another. Sarah, you're talking about the chatbot there. I know somebody else definitely mentioned they were looking at a chatbot project, potentially integrating that with Teams. Was it Alison at Eversheds, I think, maybe?
Yeah, we've got. Sorry, I can't put my video on because
okay.
We're having a dodgy internet day today. which I think is largely due to teenagers having multiple devices on each. Anyway, I shall have words. So we've got a chatbot, which is very limited. It's going to sit within Teams. And yeah, it will just sort of, it's surfacing just a fairly limited set of FAQs around about knowledge team services.
Okay.
That's all it's really doing so far. And in terms of our use of Teams, we are just really basically
Just for communications and
communications tool.
collaboration.
Yeah, not really using it for anything else yet.
But is it something that, you know, what's your view on whether that would be something that you would like to do, or is there a reason that you're not using it in many other ways at the moment?
Not a massive push from the business, I think, at the moment.
Okay.
They seem to be quite happy using other tools. There's quite a lot of use of HiQ going on as a collaboration sort of between ourselves and clients.
Yeah.
But I guess it's just people don't know the art of the possible yet.
Thank you very much. Maybe I'll go to Derek now at Aderant for sort of, you know, his take on what he's heard so far here. Derek.
Yeah, thanks, Richard.
Yeah.
So I find it interesting because, I mean, we have a slightly different take on, you know, we're not looking at one firm, we're looking at numerous, and a lot of the things that we've heard you guys are echoing is, you know, starting out early, still kind of in early stages, but, you know, as we kind of talk about this, one thing that kind of comes to my mind is that, you know, Teams is a way to present information. It's a way to, whether it's a chat, whether it's a video conference, or whether it's actual information that you want to share, like an intranet portal. I do think Teams has a very specific use case that will expand as time goes on. But one of the things, you know, Teams does have the components to say there's a me centricity to it. It's my team, so I can see information relevant to me. But then you can also have a client team or a matter team or a practice group team. So being able to share that information at that level, that context, I think is one of the things Teams does really well. You know, the talk about chatbot, I mean, that's just another way to get information. So, you know, I think that there's a difference between an intranet and Teams, but simply that's a choice that firms have to make. Where is that line drawn? But the key there is that there's knowledge to be found, and Teams is one portal into that knowledge. And so ensuring that we know why and how people are trying to use Teams, and then being able to expand that as we go on is in my mind, a really important feature. And I think it's going to be different from firm to firm. So, you know, having the tools, and I think that Teams provides you with a lot of tools kind of right out of the box, but having the tools to get that information and present it in the way that's going to make sense for your firm and your partners and your individuals at your firm is an important aspect. And because of that, Teams, my opinion is Teams has done a really good job of making that possible. It's just now, how do you want to take advantage of that? And I know Joshua's heard these a lot as a Vive, you know, talking through firms of what do you want to do with Teams, as opposed to, you know, what are you doing today? Because once we know what we want to do, Teams is very flexible. But again, should we do that based on how else we're going to get that information? So anyway, I think it's a really good question. I think you are all kind of on the same page of all the other firms we talk to. Is we know something's possible, but exactly what is it? So once we find out what it is, and then we can kind of go down that route.
Thanks, Derek. Eleanor's got her hand up. Eleanor at Owen Mitchell.
Yeah, and I remembered what I was going to say, actually, and it's very relevant, I think, fitting with what Derek just said. One of the things I think that I find particularly interesting is Teams is very much, as you just talked about, it's about your team, it's about being part of a defined group. I think one of the things that I don't think Microsoft has quite worked out yet is where Yammer fits into that, and how Teams works or doesn't work as some sort of kind of broadcast comms tool as well. And that's one of the things that I think we are, I wouldn't say struggling with, but having those sorts of debates, because you've got your intranet where you know, maybe your news goes and all that kind of stuff, but people have to go and find it. I think with Teams now, as people are using the collaboration features, they're getting more used to being in there and sort of spotting things, and, you know, things that, you know, being tagged in things and all that, sort of looking at their groups that they're interested in. But the bit that's missing, I think, is that bit that Yammer does, which is where you've got that ability to have kind of broader groups, and you can kind of get messages out to the whole organisation or have interest groups. And actually from a knowledge point of view, that's quite helpful as well. I think the only thing there is, one, how do Teams and Yammer interact? And I know they are doing some stuff at the moment to bring, I think, Yammer into the left-hand menu and have it kind of at the top. I don't think it's not there yet, certainly not on ours. I don't think it is generally. But the other thing I think is trying to work out, if I'm honest, whether Microsoft are actually committed to Yammer. I think they bought it, they stole all the ideas, they used that to build Teams, and they've got Teams now as a really good competitor to Slack, for example, that other people were kind of migrating towards. But actually, are they going to stick with Yammer long term? So if you did go down that route of saying, okay, we're going to have kind of different repositories that we put different information, that might be your company information, your staff information, your know-how, and then separately your kind of comms and things, you know, is Yammer a long-term store for that? Or is Microsoft at some point going to turn around and say, actually, we've nicked all the good ideas out of Yammer that we want, we're not interested anymore, and ditch it, at which point you've created a whole kind of, you know, strategy around using Yammer for comms. So I think we're, you know, it's an interesting debate, I think, as to where that fits in. I'd be interested to know if anyone else is using Yammer, because obviously that is part of what's available through C365 as well. And if you are, whether you've got your heads around explaining to people what you do in Yammer and what you do in Teams and what you do in your inbox.
Thank you.
I was going to just jump in real quick. So, you know, trying to understand what Yammer or what Microsoft is going to do is always an interesting endeavor. So I think you're right in being concerned about something like Yammer. But no, I think the one other aspect is, outside of Yammer, there are other tools that you can even build with the tools that Microsoft has provided. So, you know, I think it's a really good point of, what do you take out of the box from Microsoft, but what do you look at other third-party providers that can fit into Teams that can do similar things? Because those have probably an easier life cycle to understand than some of the things that Microsoft has purchased or is building, because we all know that Microsoft likes to build projects and then walk away from them, sometimes without much knowledge.
I've just been reminded to ask you, if you haven't already, if you could put on your chat windows, if you're happy to do so, as some people may not have done. Did anyone else want to address the point about Yammer, or indeed the considerations around other tools that we are going to come on a bit later to talk about, sort of, you know, integration and apps more specifically, I think. But if anyone did have a point to make on that, do let us know. The other thing I think we should just touch on before we do get onto this very, very quick poll and then move on to the other points, is that in that first point, there was this idea of, you know, surfacing the intranet securely. So I guess, you know, we haven't really talked about any security considerations around this much. Does anybody have those? If you were going to, you know, expand the use of Teams significantly, whether it is with regard to your intranet or anything else?
I think for us, the only security concerns would come when we used it for client matter work, which we don't currently. So we don't have some of the enhanced Microsoft licensing, particularly around things like data loss prevention or applying ethical rules. So we prevent the use of Teams for sort of substantive conversations about client work at the moment. That's probably a project for next year.
Okay.
But in terms of internal content, we've got no concerns. We just do some light touch governance behind the scenes in terms of file retention, chat retention, to make sure things aren't staying on there for too long.
Okay. Yeah.
We're doing that now as well, and doing the chat retention. But one of the things that we were quite surprised to find when we first rolled it out was that you could go in and retrospectively edit the chat. And obviously, in terms of client work, that's an issue for us, so we don't use it for that. But even in terms of HR policies, if you're being bullied or whatever, and somebody can go in and then retrospectively delete whatever they've said, that's an issue. So we've had to apply security over the top of it to make sure that the messages couldn't be edited, but they are editable just by default, which we were really surprised about.
Okay. Yeah. Susan, I think you've rejoined us. So if you want to make the point that you were trying to make earlier, or to talk on this idea of whether you're confident in the security of Teams for these purposes. Yeah, we still got the same issue, I think. Sorry, Susan. I would like to hear that, whatever it is you are trying to say, but I can't read. Unfortunately. Okay, shall we go to the poll? As I say, it's just two very quick questions. Tracy in the background there, if you could bring up. Oh, no, it's Rupert doing it. Okay, thank you, Rupert. If you could just bring it up very quickly. We've already talked about, I think somebody's mentioned SharePoint as obviously a potential alternative to this course. Have you rolled out SharePoint online? Yes or no? It's obviously anonymous. I should think it won't take very long for you to tick one of those boxes. Rupert, will you be able to tell when we've had enough responses? Oh. Assuming people are happy to answer that question, then please do so. Have we got any yet, Rupert? It's saying no one's voted at the moment. Maybe if anyone has voted, maybe you could let us know, just so we know that there's a problem. You have, Lynn?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I have as well.
Thank you, Richard. So we seem to have a bit of a problem. Do we want to try the second one, or no? We probably will need to leave that, I guess, or come back to it. We might be able to investigate what's happening. Okay. So moving on to the next slightly broader point, I suppose, obviously ties to what we've talked about already, which is the idea of bringing knowledge closer to where the fee earners now work and how important that is. And of course, for most of us, I suppose that means, working from home in whichever systems that they are working in. Who has that as a general priority, whether it's through Teams or not? Maybe can I come back to Alison at Eversheds?
Sorry, I was just trying to type in that I saw the poll pop up and then it disappeared and then I lost track and I wasn't really listening. What was the question?
Oh, I'm sorry. Coming to a broader topic of just getting the knowledge in whatever, using whatever system it may be, but closer to where fee earners are working. So perhaps that might not be core systems, but the systems that they're using, like Teams, for example. Yeah.
So absolutely, we have a bit of a concern because we've done some audits of how our kind of knowledge system, our SharePoint-based system, is being used at the moment. And whilst we had a flurry of stuff that was basically briefings and articles related that people were churning out in relation to the pandemic and continue to churn out, our normal levels of know-how submissions have dropped off a cliff. We don't really understand why. So we're just starting a questionnaire, and we're going to be doing some sort of focus groups to try and find out whether that's just because the team PSL is not doing that walk around the desks to say, what have you done? What know-how is there? Whether it is just harder for people because they're working remotely and they haven't got access to we don't really know whether is it a scanners thing? Is it just out of sight, out of mind?
Yeah.
Because that it's at a time when we anticipated to find the opposite. We anticipated that people would be going to the system a lot more, but our search visits have dropped down and our submissions have dropped down.
Okay, interesting. Thank you. I'm going to go to some people who haven't had a chance to speak yet. Sarah at Allen and Overy.
Hello, everyone. I'm actually the worst person to ask this question of because I don't deal with this.
Excellent.
So I'm going to delegate to Louisa, who is on the call.
Okay.
who might know the answer. So apologies for that.
Thank you, Sarah. Your question was, are we trying to get our knowledge closer to our fee earners?
Yes, through whichever system it might be, Teams.
Yeah, well, similar to what everyone else has said, I think on the call, we're pretty early adopters of Teams as well. We had some use of Teams before the pandemic, and then we are now using Teams primarily for video conferencing. I think one of the things that we've found about Teams that we don't particularly like is the flat structure, that you can be members of lots of teams, and it's really hard to find things overall. So, you know, people are already a member of 30, 40 teams. It's quite hard to see what's going on in all those teams.
Right.
So the flat structure for a global organisation or a larger organisation, I think, is a real drawback of Teams.
Yeah, okay.
From a knowledge perspective, yes, we'd like to reduce the email traffic. We'd like to have everything more in one place and more accessible. And I guess we'll come on to this a bit later, the integration point with other systems. I guess we're a bit worried about longer term maintaining a central store of truth or some central repository. But yes, we can definitely see the benefit in using Teams and the speed, the informality, the fact that it's easy to use. And as a firm, we are using lots of Microsoft products and Microsoft tools, and can certainly see the sense in everything speaking to each other.
Okay, thank you. How about Kathy Mattis, if you can hear me?
Yes, I'm not sure whether my video is working. I have teenagers too, so they're probably streaming something, and I can't get onto it, but hopefully you can hear me. I think the reflection I have is that we were using Teams on projects, so on a sort of transactional basis, but within business services before the pandemic, and now all our fee earners are on Teams, and we as a firm are looking at, ahead at our 365 journey, and planning on how we're going to use Teams beyond just communicating, beyond having meetings. But I think there's, when I read, because I was in knowledge a number of years ago, when I read your questions, I was thinking about getting knowledge closer to the fee earners. For me, rather than getting it to those communities of interest, it was more around getting it to the matter, where, that was how I interpreted the question. Right. And so I think there's some interesting things there in contrasting the very established use of Teams to share knowledge and to manage projects from a sort of PMO and business services perspective, to the much more problematic issues of getting matters onto Teams, if that is in fact where we want to go. All of the matter centricity and firing up an equivalent space on expert and iManage and all of these sort of things that we can see that Teams isn't going to be our place of record. It's not easy to save from Teams. How do we archive matters afterwards? All of these are questions that we're asking ourselves and exploring at the moment. So I think interesting times ahead, and like you say, it's that question, can you, and actually should we?
Okay, yeah. You were saying it's not your place of record though.
Yeah, no, it's not.
Yeah. Joshua, you were talking about bringing knowledge and the matter closer together when we spoke the other day.
Yeah, so thanks, Richard. A few comments. 100%. We also don't view Teams as a source of record. What we're looking at is how we bring. You need to define your governance requirements around the various types of interactions and content. They're going to be worked in Teams. So we're talking about chats versus posts. The chat tends to be casual. You set governance to blow that away. A post might be something that you retain because it's attached to the matter level and the document at the matter level. And there are tools that allow you to save that alongside the document inside your document management system. So there are a couple of very quick things. There are very interesting third-party tools that have emerged on the market that allow us to do everything from user provisioning to security to governance, but there's no one-size-fits-all tool at this point. And so what that means is, again, prioritizing our scenarios and deciding how complex or how simple we need this environment to be. For bringing knowledge closer, So I am actually a huge fan of using Teams in a matter-centric way. And one of the things that Teams gives us is not just that ability to have matter-focused Teams sites, but to leverage the persona information. And someone mentioned this, it might have been A&O, that talked a little bit about the integration to other systems and those different points of integration. So this is where it is not necessarily a near-term project, but a long-term for some firms, which is that if we have the right data points, in other words, we know who you are, we know what matter you're working on, we know where you are within the phases of that matter, if you capture that type of information, to the degree that we can connect that to our knowledge bases, then we can also push that knowledge content to users through Teams rather than obliging them to search for it. And I think that potential of marrying execution with proactive access to the firm's knowledge resources is for several firms well within their grasp and potentially a significant upside. The other thing I'll quickly add, and I know we could talk for hours about these topics, when it comes to soliciting knowledge content, another thing again to look at is, and I have no firm answers for this stuff, but we've also thought about that question, which is we're not in the office anymore. How do we solicit? And again, it in a lot of ways comes down to the data points that we're capturing over the course of the matter life cycle and against the individuals in the firm, because we might use tools like Foundation or Intap Experience as an example, connected to workflow triggers where we are soliciting information as well as pushing information to people over the course of the matter. And then you get into the how do you do contributions through the DMS, which I'm not going to get into now. So it's not simple. I guess my bottom line is it's not simple, but it's possible if you break down your specific use cases and start to experiment. And when Richard and I spoke yesterday, I said, everything that we're doing right now falls under the heading of experimentation. We're lucky enough to have clients who are actively exploring these options with us, but it's one of those fun areas where we're also prepared to fail. And I think that's also the attitude that we have to take, is we're exploring trying to replace in-person interactions, in-person knowledge solicitation. The dissemination of knowledge is not going to be easy, but I think that taking it from that perspective, which is what data points do we have available? Are we mapped against the matter life cycle? Are we able to map that against the manner in which we have organized our knowledge content and our knowledge content strategy is absolutely possible within Teams, and frankly also within the intranet, to the degree that you have them running at the same time.
Okay, thank you very much. And interesting in the chat, which everyone can see, of course, this idea of not wanting another system to check as being a potential blocker, which Richard's mentioned when they are all working in Outlook. People are all working in Outlook. We're just going to try the poll one more time, if that's okay, before going on to the final third. Azalise, I think you're going to bring up the poll for me, aren't you? And if you wouldn't mind just giving the answer to that question one more. Oh, you've already done it. We've already got it. Okay, thank you. Have you rolled out SharePoint Online? Multiple choice, yes or no, well, of course. And a third of people have rolled out SharePoint Online, as you can see, and 2/3 have not. Can we have the second question, please? Azalise. And this is a multiple choice. What is your 2021 project priority? I guess there could be more than one priority. So top priority, we'll say. And as you can see, intranet implementation, intranet update, client portals, document management, data cleanup, or an other. We're crossing our fingers we'll get the result faster this time. How's it looking, Azalise? $16, that's pretty good, isn't it? Thank you. Can we see the results? Oh, mostly another. And no plans for no top priorities for an entirely new intranet implementation. Okay, well, thank you very much. We are now into the third, which is this idea of blending Teams with other solutions. So we have obviously touched on that a little bit already, but I'd be interested in any experiences of trying to do so, or plans to do so, or potential challenges in doing so. And I'm going to come to a few people who haven't spoken as yet. I think there probably are still a few. For example, Claire at Fire & Co. You might want to tell us a little bit about where you are with Teams as well.
Yeah, well, we're sort of fairly early stages with Teams. It was rolled out pretty quickly post lockdown, I think. So I only joined in May, and I think it came post then. But it's been a very fast rollout, and everyone's sort of taken to it, very quickly. But we are, like others, using it much more in a sort of comms way, and quite simple, simplistically. I'm not hearing much in the way of using it as a matter tool and a matter collaboration space. I think that's very interesting. I think for us, unrelated to this, we've rolled out DocuSign, and one of our issues with DocuSign was to make sure that we always had that version of the truth and that bridge back to our DMS. And there is a plug-in tool, Signature Bridge is a plug-in tool, so that we just know that anything that's in DocuSign then goes straight into the DMS. And I think what I'd be interested in with Teams is actually that if you can have all these collaboration spaces and this talk and sharing of knowledge, but you just know it then translates back into the matter space within your DMS. That's, I think, what we would need. And I can't say that we've explored that, but that's certainly something I'm thinking of. How we have actually used Teams really successfully is actually with training. We've found people are so familiar with it, and they feel so comfortable in it, that we are doing a lot of our training now as sort of shorter space, sort of 30-minute, more bite-sized training, and we're asking fee earners just to record their presentations, just do them without an audience, just record them on Teams and send us, and then we upload those, so we're getting a really nice database. And we have Panopto, so linking it in with Panopto, but at the moment we're just doing a physical, we take it out of Teams, then we upload it into Panopto, where we store our audio and video files. But that's been quite good, because you can just say to people, to do the training, they're sitting at home in a quiet space, and just, so that's been really successful.
Okay, yeah, no, I hadn't heard about that one. That's an interesting one. Thank you very much. Anybody else? Rochelle, maybe? If somebody was trying to speak, I'll come back to you.
Well, please let someone else speak, because we are very much at the beginning of looking at Teams as a tool. Yeah, I think it's in our IT for piloting and things. So I'm just here for general ideas, best practice kind of thing.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Who, if someone was trying to speak, please raise your hand, as I'm not sure it was. Richard, how about you on the this idea of integration with other systems? Is that something that would be good, or particularly difficult?
Yeah, I think it's the way around that it happens. I think what's the interesting things that are happening on Teams at the moment is that people are seeing the potential to build apps or exploit the existing apps or tools within Teams to manage and do work in different ways. And I think, apart from pulling the intranet through into Teams or vice versa, we're also probably thinking more about, I guess, integrating content rather than other systems into Teams.
Right.
So using old school technologies like RSS to pull contextual content through into a particular team. I work with clients whose in-house teams are using Teams as that, that tool, I guess, for managing their inbound current awareness. So that's quite an interesting trend that we've supported them on. I think the other thing that's been touched on in the call, and again that we're seeing, is either Microsoft's own or third-party providers, essentially of deal content sets that you can push out through Teams. We've seen some quite interesting things about sort of in the L&D space from third parties or from Microsoft about well-being, which I think is as much Microsoft strategically trying to create stickiness so that gradually, Teams becomes the world which you live. So maybe it's less about integrating other systems into Teams and more Microsoft making the Teams ecosystem much richer with tools and add-ins so that it becomes the place where you can do work. But there are lots of caveats for that, particularly for law firms, about where documents are managed and stored, about yes, we have moved to SharePoint Online, but we've got lots of nervousness internally driven by our clients about how we use cloud systems, and that's impacting on the use of some of the additional features in Teams. So maybe there's some law firm specifics there about restrictions on things that we can use and technologies that we can use that might be mitigating about some of that integration or richer experience.
Okay, thank you. Thanks very much. Helen, I think you were wanting to say something. Helen at Mitchell Moores.
Yeah, hi. Sorry, I've not been able to raise my hand electronically for some reason.
That's okay.
We rolled out Teams, or part of the Teams capability, only in December. And we've very quickly seen the massive potential for knowledge sharing, and also that I have to say the potential for silos and information chaos as well. So we're kind of really keen to sort of learn from others about the lessons learned from how other people have been using it. One of the things that has come up already is the idea of having communities of practice or practice knowledge networks using Teams, which I think is a great way, because we see it very much as a informal or a tool for informal exchange of knowledge. But it's like, how do we then kind of where so it might be it might be chat, or it might be collaboration on a document. If you've got a collaboration on the document or content, and that's a sort of fairly sort of simple one to then transfer to a more formal KM repository, if you like, which we use the Aderant Handshake product on top of SharePoint for our knowledge. But where it's the more sort of the tacit informal exchange of knowledge in chat, and something might come out of that, some kind of gem lesson learned that might lend itself to a more formal management, then how best to deal with that, and also the whole kind of protocol, I suppose, or guidance for people using Teams and more formal repositories, so that everyone's sort of clear as to how best to get the most value out of all of the technology available to them.
Okay, thank you. Thanks very much. Joshua, you wanted to say something on the previous point, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, it relates to Claire, but Helen, it also fits very well with what you just mentioned. One of the things that we're seeing with some users is that they prefer working on documents inside of Teams than using the document management system directly, and I think that's something worth thinking about for everyone, because if you have that simple access to Office 365, you can create files in Teams, again, as long as it's governed. And this is stuff that we've been talking to and working with Aderant Handshake on with respect to some of the back and forth synchronization and that ability to work in Teams and then bring it back into the document management and then promote it again via what's effectively the intranet, and then those pieces that we bring back into Teams in a circle. But you know what you said, Helen, I think it's really worth. This is, for me as a former lawyer, probably the thing in Teams that I am most excited about, and that's the ability to have document level posts. So those conversations at the document level that otherwise get lost in email, right? So not just a clause by clause or inline commenting, but as we all know, when a document then gets passed around the firm, even if they're using links, if it's filed in the document management system, the email's in one silo and the document's in another silo. And as Helen said, those nuggets are effectively lost, whereas the ability to capture those, retain them in the source system as the DMS, move them out through workflow via the knowledge reviews, and then republish them as a part of the context around documents, I think has enormous knowledge potential, as well as alleviating some of the email management traffic that we have internally within the firm. So I think it's a really, this is an area that certainly we're having a lot of fun exploring. We don't know where it's going to end up yet because it represents a pretty fundamental change in how people work. But when you combine the document level threads with co-authoring, with the ease of launching it in Teams, the document management system almost falls into being the back-end secure governed source repository and not necessarily the front end where they're working, which then facilitates that transition to bringing your knowledge content in through, yeah, I mean, we use all the persona tools that Handshake has to offer to be able to really target the delivery of that inside those matter pages or the matter-based teams. So I would say play around with that because it's a lot of fun. It's very interesting to see how people react to a different model of creating and collaborating.
Thank you, Joshua. Anybody else want to comment on Claire's original point about whether fee earners or you're encouraging or getting fee earners to use Teams for matter work and sharing of knowledge on matters? Do raise your hand, of course. Nobody?
I'll have to work that one out for myself then.
I think just on that one, we've had a few conversations about that. At the moment, we use it for collaboration, but not on client matters. And I think our big concern, as other people have mentioned, is about confidentiality and security, data protection, those sorts of issues. And it's quite difficult, is the only thing I would say. It's quite difficult to say to people you can use it for collaboration, but you can't use it for client stuff. You can talk, there is absolutely nothing wrong. Certainly, I think from and we've had conversations with our general counsel team, you know, you can talk about principles of something as long as there's no mention of who that is and what the particular case is, which is at the end of the day knowledge sharing. So you can talk about, you know, a principle around a particular matter that you're working on, and that is, as I say, that's perfectly acceptable. But we haven't promoted that either, because I think it gets very difficult to say you could do it like this, but you gotta, you know, get your language right. You can't quite say it like this. So yeah, we've kind of avoided. We've gone with a blanket. You can't do client work on it. But what we have found, sorry about that. What we have found is that but basically being able to talk about other work that's going on for fee earners saves them a huge amount of time, basically. So if they're able to can I just check you can all still see me, because something
yes,
we can. On my screen. Well, that's right. It's all right. My phone started ringing and it's ringing on my screen, which is
I can
helpful. Yeah, so basically I think what we have found for the collaboration side of it is that giving people the option to collaborate on other things that generally takes quite a lot of their time. So this might be stuff related to people management, leadership, HR things, operational things, those sorts of things, projects, etc. Actually, that saves them a lot of time. So even though they're not doing the client matter work on it, the fact they're doing the other stuff they need to do, which takes up time, that's helping them to be, I think, more efficient in what they do. And yeah. And it just means that you're kind of getting more people involved more quickly. I found some stuff just to help explain this, where it sort of talked about the difference between collaborating in a system like Teams versus sending an email, and the number of exchanges you have on an email versus popping it up on a collaboration system like Teams, and basically the time saved, but also the fact you get that kind of comment out to a much wider group of people right from the beginning, so you get input from lots of different people straight away. And that makes quite a difference. So yeah, not client stuff, not matter stuff, but the rest of it really.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Eleanor. Thank you. That's very interesting. Well, we've only got a few minutes left, just under 5 minutes left. So I'm going to maybe come back to Derek at Aderant. If you have any final observations on the sort of second half of this, like sort of came to you after the first half.
I just have a couple general comments. I mean, I think you guys are all, everyone's kind of said, early stages of Teams. I think one thing that Microsoft is doing with Teams is the amount of investment and the amount of resources they're putting into Teams is remarkable. So I think, I made a comment about how you never know what's happening with Microsoft and some of their products. I think that with Teams, we do know the amount of changes that are coming into Teams is just, it's amazing. And, we develop on Teams quite a bit now, and it's a big focus for us. And, in the last 6 months, the amount of things that they've thrown into Teams and is just huge. So, the one feeling I have is that Microsoft is putting their money behind Teams. So I think that's something to kind of keep in mind as we kind of go forward with this. I like Teams as a collaboration standpoint, because I think it does allow you to bring up multiple things in. One of the problems I see with Teams just in general is that you can have all these different apps, you can have all these different tabs, but again, those are usually separate. So how do we combine I've got documents, I've got financials, I've got, calendaring information. How do I put all that together in one screen as opposed to having to go to 3 screens? I think that's something that's a challenge, and we have to kind of figure out how we end up doing that, how we pull that together. But then the other thing, just in the chat, Richard, your comment about people working with Outlook, and that's kind of what we see as well. I'm just really interested, does Teams become that? Does Microsoft try to push Teams as the place where people work? And if that's the case, then I think, putting information in Teams makes sense. If that's not going to be the case, then maybe it doesn't make sense. Maybe it's just another thing. Time will tell if that works out. But from what we've heard from you guys, it sounds like everyone's kind of right on the edge. Just which way do we go? What do we end up doing with Teams? So this is a really interesting conversation, because, from my perspective, it helps me. Yeah, everyone's interested. Now what? What's that next step? And so, hopefully that I don't think there's a silver bullet that gives us that answer, but I think there's a lot of good ideas in this call. So appreciate being part of it.
Thank you, Derek. Thank you, and thank you, everybody. Yes, Joshua made that point about everybody sort of seems to be in an experimental phase at the moment and needs to be able to experiment with it. So one thing I would say again, as I said it at the beginning, is I think you should all have been invited to join our not sort of private knowledge community group that we've set up. Many of you may have done so, but we can continue talking about some of these things in that group. And as I was mentioned, this has been our launch of Knowledge Leaders. We've got more events coming up over the next half a month or so. Please do join us for some more of them. Hopefully see you again soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
That was great. Thank you.